Welcome to Happiness by Habit, the podcast where we uncover habits and strategies for building joy, achieving personal growth, and balancing life's many roles. I am your host, Silvana Pimentel. I am so glad you are here with us today. Each week, we will dive into topics that inspire and empower, from personal development and productivity to parenting and career success. So grab a coffee or something stronger and let's craft a little more happiness into our lives. One day at a time. Let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Happiness by Habit. I am so happy and excited about today's guest. He's not only a very well-known speaker, a podcast host, an expert in positioning products as profit centers, but she is also someone I've had the privilege of working with in the past. I consider her my friend. We were just catching up, but we have so much to catch up. She's incredible, talented, and such an inspiring individual. I've been a fan of her podcast, Prospecting on Purpose, which is ranked in the top three globally. Top three globally. It's full of amazing insights, and it has been a huge inspiration for me as I launched my own podcast. Her name is Sara Murray. Her drive and passion are contagious. I'm thrilled to have her here and to share her expertise and story. Sara, welcome to the show. It's an honor to have you here.
Silvana, I'm so excited to be reconnected with you and be on your show. It's such an honor, and I'm excited for this journey for you too. I know you have so much passion and happiness to share with the world.
That is so sweet, dear. As we were starting our conversation, we were like catching up and so excited, so many things to talk about. But I would love to kick things off with your journey. How did you get started in sales and product positioning? And what inspired you to create your incredible podcast, Prospecting on Purpose?
Yeah, it's funny. I really only kind of recently I've been thinking about like childhood and your job as a teenager and like what you're interested in college and like piecing all those things together as part of your journey. So I always joke that the way that I got into sales was that my mom worked for the airline and we were very lucky to fly, in the empty seats, but it meant we never got to sit together as a family. So as a little kid, I'd be sitting next to strangers on the plane and just ask the person next to me. This was back when the airlines served food. I'm like, hey,
I know, but
are you going to eat your brownie? And it just ended up being an icebreaker to start a conversation. And so I usually joke that I just like to talk to people, and that started at a young age, and it translates really nicely to sales. But I moved to Los Angeles when I graduated college, and I got a job at a company that made decorative hardware. Was hired as a marketing coordinator role, and then very quickly got into a sales role because I liked it. And the sales director
for you.
Yeah, it's so funny because the sales director at the time, she had laryngitis and she couldn't talk. And so I was the person there. So I just like started doing it and it worked out really well. And then when she ended up leaving the company, I stepped into her position as my first director of sales. And then I've served in leadership roles or national roles in 3 different companies prior to starting my business. And it really boils down, I think, to like 2 big things. One is the ability to build relationships, because business is all about relationships and the results come second, but you can't pull the results without the relationship. So that's kind of my one pillar. And then the other pillar is really the ability to speak to people's business model and what makes them tick. How is my product or service helping their life or elevating their business or saving them money or, increasing their life. So it kind of, those 2 things are just really passionate. And I decided to build a business to really teach people how to do those 2 things. Those are kind of the core focuses.
Oh, that's very nice. I remember back when you and I worked together, that you always went the extra mile, and I love that about you.
Thank you.
Very good. Let's talk about your podcast. Your podcast has achieved such an impressive milestone, right? Top 3 globally. What do you think sets you apart? And what advice would you give out to the podcasting world?
Sure. Yeah. No, thank you for that. Yeah, I'm very proud to say that Prospecting on Purpose has hit the top charts, I think in 20 5 countries at this point. So I just
Wow.
Japan and Greece are on the top list right now. So it's kind of interesting. I will tell you, I this was an accidental thing that I did, but I do think it really helped when I was starting out. I am very lucky to be connected with really inspiring people, right? And then those inspiring people have their own network of professionals and friends and family. And so when I was starting out, I had quite a few guests that actually had a pretty global footprint. And so I invited them to be a guest on my show. But then when the episode aired and when they shared it, all of a sudden I'd see different countries coming in. And so I think I know you're a very global person, Silvana, too. Like you have a nice network around the world, but I think leveraging a more global approach versus just a United States where I'm based approach, I think that really helped because then people can learn in other areas what works here. But when we chat and we share and we have guests, it's not from such a narrow focus. And I think that was something that really served me well, even though I stumbled into it accidentally.
Oh, that's beautiful. Sarah and I were just talking before we started the podcast today about some of the benefits and the beautiful things about doing the podcast is that you get to learn about these amazing people you interview. And can you tell me a little bit about that? What have you learned during your journey as in the podcasting?
Sure. I
Oh,
one of the things that I feel that whatever you do for your job, most of us is a general blanket statement. A lot of us stay pretty focused in our industry and pretty focused on our work or what our roles is, whether it's HR or sales, there's a lot of like blinders on. And I think one of the things that I wanted to do with my podcast is interview people from kind of different areas of business. But then what has really come from that is that you take little nuggets from each of these conversations and see how it applies to you and your life and your business. And I think from where are we going as like a professional, and humanity, if we're able to be more open-minded and kind of pull what's working from other areas of business and life, I think that's what's going to set us up for success, especially kind of with AI coming around. Like we need to remember our humanness. And I think the ability to pull from the different guests, learn from it. If you're listening to podcasts too, make sure you listen to the guest episodes because there's a lot of knowledge in there that's shared. You just need to kind of really see how is this knowledge applicable to me and how does it help in the lens that I'm looking at. And I think be open-minded, but apply it specifically to your life and your business. And that's going to be really where you get the most value out of listening to podcasts.
yes, I would agree with that statement. Um, I would like to know, Sarah, I remember the day when you decided to leave the corporate world. That took a lot of to be so brave from on your end because you left a very good job where you had a really promising career path, but you decided to go to pursue your dream. Tell us about that moment, please.
Yeah, I appreciate you asking that, Savannah. It was not an easy decision. It really took a lot of reflection. And I actually think the pandemic is something that really changed things for me, mainly in a sense of where are my strengths for like me as an individual and what type of fulfillment do I want in my life? And obviously work is a big part of our lives because it takes freaking hours. And really wanted to serve people in a different way. And it was a really hard decision because I did have a good job. I had great relationships. I always joke that when I resigned, I went through like 200 breakups. There was a lot of because it was hard, but I was listening to my intuition and it was really telling me this is the next move. You have to try it. You'll always regret it if you don't. You have to try. And I left on really nice terms because I think you could see this is just the next step for her and her journey. And if you have nice teammates, you have nice colleagues, they'll support you on that. And so I felt very supported. And I will tell you, Silvana, you'll like this, but I'm single and I don't have kids. And there's kind of this like to say a stereotype, but when we celebrate things in people's lives, it's like wedding, engagement, baby shower, like it's kind of buying a new home, like it's all those things. And I will tell
Mhm.
you, when I chose to start my business, I felt really celebrated and really supported in the way that you could only hope. People show up for you, people come out of the woodwork to help you. I mean, I kind of joke like I'm not running the business alone. I have so many people supporting me. And I think that's really where, they have that phrase, if you leap and the net will appear. Sometimes the net is actually your network and the people that really help lifting you up and support you and hire you and refer you. So I felt very blessed and supported. And I think I knew that before I quit. And that gave me the confidence to start the business.
Yes, that is so true, Sarah, because I remember when you broke the news and I being on the other side, it was such a mixed feelings because we were all very sad to see you leave, but it was for a good reason, and it was because you were pursuing your dream. So that was definitely a good moment to celebrate you. And I am so happy how far you have continued celebrating your success, and that's very nice. So I know one of your goals was to go globally. You have accomplished that in a very good way. What is next for you, Sarah?
Oh, that's a loaded question, Silvana. I think I do feel like, so I've been in business 2 years now, like the 2024, we're recording this at the end of 2024. It's my second full year in business. I feel a lot more stable now.
Hmm.
I think at the beginning, you kind of just have to have a lot of fishing hooks in the water. You have to kind of fish in a lot of different ponds to figure out what you like and what your messaging is. So, I think year one was a lot of just trying stuff and seeing what was working. And the podcast was a really nice, consistent anchor to hold on to because it kept me disciplined. It kept me working on something even when things were slow because I didn't have clients. It gave me a purpose that I could start to really like ground into. Year two, I feel a lot more stable just from where my money is coming from. What am I actually selling? Because that was kind of messy to figure out too. And I got clear on, okay, I like doing sales trainings. I like consulting for companies and I like keynotes and workshops. Like that's been really fun. So now I have more clarity. I can start to communicate more effectively and have my network communicate effectively too. Because that's the other thing. People want to support you and refer you, but if they can't communicate what you do is a little hard. I think
Yeah.
getting a lot of clarity this year. Next year, this is a good question. I do feel like I want to streamline some processes. That's never really been my zone of genius. So I want to make it a little bit more automated because there's so many softwares out there. And so automate. But what I would like to do is make my podcast a little bit more interactive. So I'm
Okay.
going to do a couple like LinkedIn Live episodes. Maybe like every quarter we do an office hour because I think one of the things that's tricky with podcasting is it's kind of one way and you don't always know who's listening. You don't always know who you're helping. And so the people who have like sent me LinkedIn messages, I have a couple clients that I cherish that I work really closely with that I got from, they just happen to be listeners of the podcast. So I think, also kind of moving forward and knowing that nothing's done in vain. You never know who's going to listen to something or find you somewhere and lead to your next thing. So making the podcast a little bit more interactive, streamlining more processes. I do have an idea for a book that I really want to write, probably with the same name. That
Oh, nice.
one that one may not be a 2025, big goal, but maybe 2026. But I'm working with the coach. I have the table of contents. I think it just, as you're kind of building your ecosystem and your intellectual property, you have to strategize what makes the most sense to spend your time. So I think for this upcoming year, it's a lot of making sure I have consistent revenue so that I can understand where the money is going so that I can hire help, have a little bit more stability. So I think it's still building mode, but I'm building with a lot more clarity and vision. And now I have some really nice clients that I can get bigger clients. So I had a meeting today with a really heavy hitter Fortune 500 company, and it seems like that's
Oh,
forward. But now with that one, I can go get the next one. So it's just kind of these building blocks and staying patient when it feels like you're just shouting into the void.
yeah. So happy for you, Sarah. That's awesome. And I love the idea about the book. It will be a beautiful book. And I wouldn't be surprised if it becomes a bestseller if you put your heart into it, as I know you will.
I think it's gonna happen. I just don't know when. That's the metric. But
That's good that you put it on the plans.
yeah.
Yeah, it's going to happen for sure. So let's talk a little bit about the topic of your podcast. You are known for helping businesses position their products as profit centers. Can you break that concept down for us? And what is the core idea behind it? And why does it matter so much?
Sure. And I think my favorite example to give, and maybe Silvana, I'll throw it back at you. Do you drink Starbucks?
Yes,
Let
do.
me ask you, why do you like Starbucks? What do you like about it?
Because it's a special. They make it special for me as I like it. It's a place where I can network, where I can just be comfortable,
So it's customized. They create a nice environment for you to be at.
nice experience.
Do you use the app? Do you order it on your phone ever?
Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But yes,
Because I think I like this example because everyone, for the most part, has been to a Starbucks or for Starbucks. You ask people what they like about Starbucks, they never really say they like the coffee.
the coffee. That's right.
You know, and I think it's a really good example of we like Starbucks because it enhances our lives, whether that's making it more efficient. You can order from the app and it's ready to go, whether you're there to go work and meet people and network, whether you like the customization and you can be really specific on how you want your drink and it's going to be consistent wherever you go. So I think when we talk about selling to business model or selling to like how does your product or service elevate your client's life, so many people go into this thing, I call it product vomiting. I probably need a better word, but it's talking product and facts and figures, and it's like that's just you're just another salesperson at that point. So a big part of the podcast, Prospecting on Purpose, it's pretty sales heavy, sales and business conversations, but it's really around how can we be very intentional with our efforts, and then we talk to our clients like business needs or emotional needs instead of just regurgitating our product facts. And so what I do is I'll work with companies to really help understand their messaging behind their product or service and how it does that. I can share a B2B example. I worked at a company that sold fire pits and fire features, so like fire elements. And you'd be talking to a hotel owner and he'd be asking, how hot does it get? What's the material? How much does the fuel cost? You know, all of these product questions. And salespeople, I think they get into this thing where if they can answer all those questions, they think they're doing a great job. But really, you're just kind of going back and forth on facts. None of it's being retained. No, it's not the most efficient way to sell something. So what I'll do instead is I'll find all the business messaging behind the product or service. So, hey, Mr. Hotel Owner, this fire pit on your pool deck is going to be a marketable amenity feature. You could put it on your website to attract guests. Don't worry about the fuel costs because it's going to pay for itself in the first round of drinks. Guests are going to want to hang out on your hotel pool deck, sit around the fire, and buy cocktails, and it's going to make you money. This fire pit's going to make you money. And so it's such a different conversation if you can talk to like the program piece, like the Starbucks example, or the business model piece. And that's really like the core theme of the work that I do.
It's gonna help create memories, and it's gonna be an Instagrammable. How do you call it? Instagrammable place.
Moment.
The moment, yes, for sure. And that definitely brings a lot of value.
Yes,
Oh, I love that.
ambiance. People are going to post pictures of your pool deck. Like nobody cares about
Propose there. They got all kinds of
how hot the fire pit gets. What's the BTU count? Who cares? I mean, sometimes you have to know that, of course, but
Well, yeah.
the beginning, and I think people just race to the product facts, and that's what everyone else does. So one way to really stand out is to speak more to the business side and the experience side.
Yes. And as you have worked with so many businesses, what is a common mistake you see when people try to position their products or services, and how can they avoid that?
Great question. I think the biggest thing is everyone focuses on themselves. Like, what does their product do? What does their business do? And instead, Have you ever heard the term WIFM? WIIFM? It's everyone's favorite radio station. What's in it for me? So I think the biggest mistake people do, and you can go to someone's website and see it's all about them, right? And it's all about their company and the history of the company. That doesn't matter yet. I think if businesses can really turn their messaging to be about who their ideal prospect is and answer their questions and get inside their head, that's really where you're going to start to stand out and differentiate, because you're showing the prospect or the client that you get them and that you care about them and that you're the right partner to be their guide in solving their problem.
That makes a big difference. Interesting. So, as in your experience as a speaker, now let's wear the speaker hat for a moment. I know your audiences love your insights. What is your favorite topic to speak about, and what makes it so impactful?
You know, this is such a funny thing, Savannah, because I have a keynote that I give, and one of the first, and it's sort of an interactive keynote, which is kind of different and fun. So you get like a 1 page to complete while you're listening, so it's more interactive. But one of the first things we do, it's all around confidence and finding your authentic self and getting secure in who you are so that you can go approach key decision makers. Because we have this tendency to put people up on a pedestal, and then we're kind of down below trying to jump up on the pedestal, and it can be very intimidating. So you want to put yourself on the pedestal with them. And one of the first things that we do, and it's become such a powerful exercise. When I first started, I thought it was maybe I shouldn't include it, but now it's such a big takeaway, is we sit and we talk about, or I ask the audience to reflect on what are their core values when it comes to work. Because, values, I think, is sort of a buzzword that gets thrown around a lot. And we can have values in different parts of our lives. So the way you show up as a parent might be much different than the way you show up as an employee or a teammate. Not totally drastically different, but your values at work, if you can get really clear on your top 3 to 5 values when it comes to work, then you have this framework for decision making. And you can decide, hey, does that company align with my values? Does that client align with my values? Does this other person align with my values? And if the answer is no, then why are you doing business with them? And I think that if you can actually get clarity on your values, it really helps all these other things fall into place. But one of the pieces of feedback that I've been getting is that people have never spent time sitting and thinking about what their core values are. And it's not, I've been blessed to present to some really, I've been blessed to present to some really high profile audiences. And I'll have people pull me aside and say, I've never thought about my values. I'm going to take some time and really sit with that, because I think it's been like a missing key. So it's just kind of a surprising one, but we talk about it pretty early on, but that's what I get a lot of feedback on is identifying our values.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. That's not something very common. We don't typically day to day think about that. But it's true also. One phrase that I heard is like, the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. Like, I guess if you think about it, is your value, if your values are, like, if you are a honest person, you're going to be honest in everything you do. Right, for sure. But yeah, interesting.
Well, I think the example, the honesty example is a great one, because let's say you have to give some difficult feedback to a teammate or something. If you have this kind of challenge, this uncomfortable situation, but honesty is one of your core values, then it becomes a lot easier to have a conversation with someone, because you're doing it from a place of like care. It's not.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
And I think it just makes some tricky situations easier to navigate if you're acting in alignment with your values.
Yes, I agree with that 100%. So, Sara, for our listeners who are ready to take their sales game to the next level, what is one simple action they can take today to start seeing results?
I think the biggest one that I could leave your audience with, it's an acronym. I call it ABAV, and it stands for always be adding value. to the thread of what's in it for me. I like just start practicing now. When you're in line at Starbucks, if you're talking to someone, the valet, if you're talking to a client, if you come from that conversation of how can I leave this person better off after interacting with me? And how can I add value to their life? That I think is the secret sauce to successful sales, because you're always in this mode of putting deposits into people's emotional bank account. If you're always adding value, then if you need something in the future, it's a lot easier to pull from a very full bank account.
That's so cool.
Yeah, even if it's something little, like I was sharing before we hit record, I need a certain contract for one of my clients, and I'm in a situation I've never been in before. But I had a podcast guest who is an expert at that. I have no problem calling that podcast guest and say, "Hey, Doug, can you help me out with this?" Because I have enough value in he's able to help me because I add value. So I would just say, get in this mindset of ABAB, always be adding value anywhere you interact, because you never know who's going to be someone who can refer you business.
I love that one. Speaking of tips, I remember at the beginning of your podcast, you were giving some tips of icebreakers to use when networking or when meeting new people. Can you give us a few examples on that?
Sure. That's actually, I did a training a couple weeks ago, and it was to a younger audience, a younger group of salespeople. And I had some executives come in, and I call them mild, medium, and spicy icebreakers. And so a mild icebreaker might be, how's the weather? Where do you live? Kind of simple stuff.
That's kind of like more towards the boring stuff. Like everybody just, okay, yes. When you don't have anything else to talk about that.
Exactly. Whereas a medium icebreaker inspires a deeper conversation. So for this particular group, they're younger salespeople out of college. One of our medium icebreakers we were talking about is they could ask their clients, how can I best support you? Or what is some advice you would give to someone just starting out in this industry? Kind of using their age as an icebreaker on its own. But then I really love, I call them spicy icebreakers. And it's still G-rated, but it's really along the sense, how are you finding fun ways to connect with someone? So Savannah, I will ask you, what is the best bird?
That's an interesting one. I don't know.
Well, that's a pretty one. I like doves too. Well, it's funny because when you do this, and it's kind of a joking question.
Right. It's so random that you even need to stop and think about it, because you will never, it's not a question you are ready to answer.
But what
Interesting.
what's funny about it is, obviously you're not going to go up to someone out of the blue and ask them what the best bird is. Like, we're not experts. But it's more along the lines of breaking some of the minutia of business conversations, number one.
Yeah.
Number two is I will tell, and I'll give you guys a tool on how to, if you ever want to try this, how you try it. But I will tell you, most of the time, people aren't weirded out by it. Most of the time, they're so grateful for a break from like the monotony.
Yeah. Of
That it's
course.
like, oh my God, I love
It's so refreshing. It's like unexpected, and it's a very good way not only to break the ice, but to connect with people.
Yes. And the way I always tell people, the way you can introduce some of these is to use a buffer. So they might, if anyone listening wants to do this, they can say, oh, I was listening to Happiness by Habit podcast on the drive here, and the host was asking, what's the best bird? And it's so random. So you kind of use a buffer. Like, I heard this.
Right. So they don't think you're like, yes. So to introduce the topic.
And it's, there's so many fun ones, and it's just fun. One of my favorite ones is, this is a thinker, but who are 3 fictional characters who make up your personality?
That's a deep one. Interesting.
What's your favorite holiday? What's your go-to karaoke song? If you could meet your ancestors or your descendants, which one would you pick? Like, there's a lot of ways to have a lot of fun with it, and just break it up.
Yeah. Spice it up.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Before we wrap up, Sarah, I would love to make sure our listeners know how to connect with you. Can you share how they can find you and tell us a bit more about the resources, courses, services you offer, please?
Sure. So my website is saramurray.com, SARAMURRAY.com. I hang out a lot on LinkedIn, so Sara Murray Sales, and you're welcome to ping me there. And then I have a really awesome YouTube channel that's starting to get a lot of traction, and we've started to hit quite a few milestones. And the YouTube version of the podcast has been very fun because there's more interaction in the comments. We can see each other. So I also have a great YouTube channel, and that's also at Sara Murray Sales.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. Speaking of interesting questions, I have a couple for you. If you had to pick a song that represents you, what song would it be?
Oh my gosh, that's a really hard one. The first song that came to mind, I love Fleetwood Mac. So Dreams by Fleetwood Mac was kind of the first one. I might need to go back,
Okay,
circle back with you on it because that's a thinker. But Dreams by Fleetwood Mac is the first one.
that's a good one. That's a good one. And when we talk about books, in order to develop all of your materials, I'm sure you get inspiration also from your people you interview. Is there any recent book or any particular person that you absolutely love and would like to share about?
Yeah, can I share two?
Yeah, sure, please do.
There is a book that just came out. It's called Leading Yourself, and it's by Elizabeth Latardo. And it's all around, a lot of business books are written for executive leadership. And this is really written for the individual and how can you control the controllables in your job, whether it's navigating a tricky boss, finding ways to find purpose in your work. I find that book to be very empowering to anyone who reads it. So it's called Leading Yourself by Elizabeth Latardo. And then the other book that I really resonated with this year is called Expand the Circle by a gentleman named Purposeful. And he's very active on LinkedIn. Both of them are. But it's all around the next version of leadership is going to be a little bit more enlightened leadership because that's just the way the world is going. We have 5 generations in the workforce. It's messy, coming out of the pandemic, there's a lot of angst. So how can you as a leader be an enlightened leader to guide others, whether you have direct reports or not? So I love both of those.
I love that. That's very good. Let's talk about what is your favorite productivity hack that helps you stay on top of everything.
Okay, this one might not be very popular, but to give myself external accountability. So usually that means I'll set a very public deadline for something, and then I have to do it before the deadline. So it's uncomfortable, but it does force me to execute because I made a commitment to a client or to myself or to the audience. Hey, on this date, February, whatever, we're going to do this thing. And then I have to go do it. So setting hard deadlines for yourself really helps done and execute.
Oh, I love that one. That's a good one. Is there any final piece of advice you would like to leave us with?
I think the biggest thing that I see, and this happens at all levels, is just this feeling of like intimidation on connecting with others. And I just would want to encourage your listeners to be really confident and secure in themselves and understand that if they're, for a connection, as long as they're coming from a place of value, for the most part, it's going to be very well received. Even if someone doesn't respond to you, what are they going to say? Oh, Silvana invited me to be a guest on her podcast. So-and-so invited me for lunch. Like if you're coming from a place of value, everything else just becomes a lot easier. So I would just say, appreciate your authenticity, add value wherever you can, and then the rest becomes a lot easier.
No, I love that. And especially just go with that, right? That when we have good intentions, you just go for it. Because one way I look at it is that no, you already have it. You can ask for it, and perhaps most likely you're gonna get more yeses than nos. And it's just matter of going for it and being strong and brave.
I love it. And when people offer to help you, take their help and say yes.
That's right. Oh, a lot of people, we have like superheroes that don't wanna Even though that's a good one, that is a very good one. As accept the help and not even like at the next, if we go to the next level, also ask for help when you need it, right?
Exactly. People are there. If there's reciprocity, and it becomes a much more pleasant way to do business together.
100%. Thank you so much for joining me today, Sara. Your insights and experiences have been really refreshing and inspiring. I know our listeners are going to be very excited and gain so much from this conversation, and I look forward for them to connect with you as well. Thank you so much, Sara, and I look forward to see you again soon.
Thanks, Silvana.
All righty. Thank you. Thanks for tuning in to Happiness by Habit. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this podcast with someone who could use a little extra joy in their day. Remember, happiness isn't just a destination, it's a habit we can create every day. Until next time, stay positive, stay curious, and keep building your joy one step at a time. Nos vemos!